Well, it's an open secret in the airline industry. A flawed design in almost all airplanes is putting flight attendants and pilots at risk. As Susie Steimle discovered, passengers can unknowingly become victims as well.
Yeah, we've got a medical issue here. We're going to have to drop into Kansas City.
July 16th, 2018, 3:43 p.m. Flight 1097 from Washington Dulles bound for LA makes an emergency landing in Kansas City.
What's the nature of the emergency? We just have some sick passengers and a pressurization issue as well.
People were being taken to the hospital.
We're calling this Alaska Airlines flight attendant Jane and keeping her identity a secret to protect her from feared retaliation.
My understanding is that the crew felt symptoms of, nausea and itching throat. That's what caused the diversion.
She says contaminated air leaked into the cabin on that diverted flight, and it wasn't the first time. Dozens of coworkers and passengers have recently been sickened by those odors. It's what's known as a fume event, and it's happened on different planes in Alaska's newly acquired Virgin America fleet. They've been sharing their experiences amongst themselves in internal emails, complaining management isn't taking them seriously, but all are fearful of speaking out.
Anybody who's trying to communicate about these instances, they have been pulled in by the company and threatened with their jobs.
Listen to this audio recording we obtained of a recent Alaska Airlines conference call in which employees are warned to keep all discussion of fumes private.
We have a very strict social media policy. We will investigate those instances where people do not abide by the policy, and the infraction can lead to termination. So please keep that in mind.
The Federal Aviation Administration and the airline industry say so-called fume events are extremely rare, less than 33 per million aircraft departures. But reporting is only required if the airline determines the fume event is linked to an aircraft component problem. Many times airlines determine it's not, which means that not all crew complaints are reported.
For the most part, the traveling public is completely unaware they could be at risk. A recent lawsuit called it the airline's dirty little secret.
I've known about it for a long time.
Mike Danko is an aviation attorney and pilot himself.
Most studies suggest that we get about 5 fume events per day in the U.S.
The magnificent new jet, with a wing spread that's bigger than the entire distance of the Wright brothers' first flight.
He says toxic cabin air has been a known concern on almost all makes of jet aircraft going back 50 years to the first commercial fleets. In this email from 11 years ago, a Boeing engineer openly discusses it with coworkers, concluding, "I think we're looking for a tombstone before anyone with any horsepower is going to take interest." The source of the contamination, according to Danko, is jet engine oil.
This one is the most popular, most common. It's called 2380.
At extremely high temperatures, all oils used in jet engines give off fumes.
The fumes contain something called organophosphates. And organophosphates are neurotoxins. Same stuff that's used in nerve gas.
And those fumes can affect crew and passengers. Here's how. Nearly all commercial jets bleed fresh air in from the engines. That air is then fed through an air conditioner into the plane. If a seal fails, toxic particles can be released into the cabin. It's described as a dirty sock smell.
We have had cases where at least one pilot was essentially totally incapacitated, and the other pilot, although having difficulties, managed to land the plane. And that is not, that has happened more than a few times, without question.
Well, when we come back, how to recognize the symptoms if you've been exposed to a fume event. We'll be right back. When contaminated air from the engine gets into the cabin of an airplane, it can make you very sick.
Susie Steimle talks to an expert about the symptoms.
Over the last 2 decades, I've seen over 100 patients.
Dr. Robert Harrison heads up UCSF's occupational health clinic. He says a single fume event can be enough to trigger serious and long-lasting health problems. Respiratory issues like tightness of chest, difficulty breathing, and nervous system problems like headaches, dizziness, memory lapses, and tremors.
My clinical experience is that these events occur, that the exposures are real and the symptoms are connected to the exposure.
And according to this FAA-funded study that Dr. Harrison co-authored, it's happening much more frequently than the FAA is reporting.
I don't think flight attendants and pilots are making this up.
As for passengers, he says he's seen only a few, possibly because when they do have symptoms, they may not relate them to their plane ride. In a statement, Alaska Airlines says, our maintenance and engineering team have found that the overwhelming majority of the reported smells have nothing to do with the aircraft. As for that diversion to Kansas City, Alaska says it was due to an odor detected in mid-cabin. The captain made the call out of an abundance of caution. No mention of sick crew or passengers, but listen to the control tower recording.
We just have some sick passengers.
Jane, our flight attendant, says all the company is really trying to do is bury the problem.
I just want people to be aware that, when they are exhibiting symptoms that they don't normally exhibit, and especially if they're frequent flyers, to get themselves checked out.
In San Francisco, Susie Steimle, KPIX 5.
The FAA provided us with their own internal report on cabin air to prove their point that fume events are rare, but the paper concludes it's not possible to quantify potential health risks without more studies. So far, there's no funding for that.